Hello, how are you doing?
I am well, thanks. I am excited for our next episode.
I am too. I'm starting to lose track of which one we're on. I think this might be seven at
I
this
think, yeah,
point.
I think it's seven.
Lucky seven. So,
Absolutely. And we get to finally hear more about the Blue Ball Inn that you have referenced as we've gone along. Of sometime we're going to talk about that. So today we're actually going to talk about that.
yeah, we're actually going to talk about the inn today. And because there's a lot to talk about with this inn, we are planning on making a bonus content episode that we will post. I'm going to be interviewing Joseph, who is the owner of the Blue Ball Inn, in a couple of days about his experience getting to own it. So if you like today's episode and you'd like more information about the inn and to hear Joseph talking about the building, please take a look and shortly you will see something about that coming along as well.
Excellent. So, as we always do, let's take a few moments to just kind of settle in and create sacred space here in which we can share and join together. So, if you are not driving, I invite you to close your eyes and take 3 slow, deep breaths. And imagine as you're breathing, imagine breathing in and out through the center of your chest, which is the center of your heart chakra. And I will sing us into sacred space.
Now that we've done seven episodes, I have to tell you something that happens every time you sing. So you sing, and I'm sitting here, and my energy level must settle tremendously because my dogs, which tend to follow me from room to room, I'm getting set up for the podcast and I'm plugging things in, and there's a lot of activity. They're all running around and they're hyper. But as soon as you sing and I mellow out, like they are both sound asleep right now. They just hit the floor and they're down for the entire time. We're on the podcast and I'm like, does she know she knows how to charm hounds? Or I think you're charming me. And then my energy level dropping is just making them go, okay, she's probably going to stay put for a while. Boom. And down they go. Their guarding duties are done because they don't usually hang out too much together. And they are both thrashed out within a foot of each other behind me on the left. So
That's fantastic. Yeah, animals are so sensitive to energy and so tuned in and aware that yeah, it's always amazing in Reiki classes and in sessions people have their animals around and yeah, they're like and half the time they'll know that we're right when we're about to start or they'll know we'll be talking, for maybe an hour and a half about like theory and practice and then it's like I'll be just about to say now we're going to go into a healing experience and their animals come from all over the house and are all of a sudden right there like yep, I'm here for that. It never fails. It's so amazing.
sign me up. I want part of
Yeah,
this.
they're like I am in here for this.
There's all these phrases we have, seeing is believing, and all these different things. And that there's so much we can't see that is constantly running in our world. And taking the time to step back and acknowledge that it's there seems to make everything run better. If you're walking out into a windstorm and not acknowledging the wind that you can't see, then you just see the effects and you feel lost as to what sort of decisions you should make. And I think a lot of times when we get busy, we sort of plow through life pretending that the weather doesn't affect us, pretending that energy doesn't affect us, pretending that what we ate for breakfast doesn't affect us. But all of these things that are both flowing around us and through us and within us are a huge part of how well our day is going to go. And the dogs know that.
Absolutely. And electronics know that. Like
Yes.
electronic things, it never ceases to amaze me how the electronics will start to short out and things will start to not work. The more like when like your energy is really out there and you're trying to plow through and get something done and everything is breaking, stop, reset your energy, and it's amazing. All of a sudden, stuff starts working again.
I don't know if I mentioned this on our last podcast where we were talking about Samael, but a lot of times he comes through really clearly during electrical storms. I'll get woken up in the middle of the night, and sometimes the times when I can hear him very clearly, or he says things that are much bigger and outside our normal conversation, are when there is a shift in energy like that. And I didn't think about this until recently, but at the inn, which we're going to talk about today, one of the things that happens there regularly is Joseph will get calls from the neighbors. He'll have shut everything off in the inn and gone home. He lives next door, and he'll get calls from the neighbors that the lights are going off and on in the inn by themselves. And I was just thinking about, oh, yeah, like here we have this electrical, you have a movement of energies happening in the house at times, and it's affecting the electrical items that are going on in there. The other thing that occasionally happens at the inn as well is we'll have a really strong cell phone or internet signal, and then it'll just disappear. It's just gone. And then it comes back later, and you're like, what happened?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
where was
fascinating.
it? Yeah, and I don't, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk a lot about my spiritual connection with the inn today. I would like to tell, because I'm sure there will be people listening who have tons of experience with paranormal investigations and things like that. I do not. I have never been on one. I am learning through people that I am now excavating with who do have this sort of experience, what some of the tools and things that they use are. Please forgive me in advance if I botch up. I'm learning. But I know one of the things that people have used in the house, I think it's called a spirit box, and it is supposed to work with, I think, radio waves. It's so interesting that we have how electricity moves and we have radio waves and we have all of these different, sometimes you'll be inside the house and suddenly the temperature will change really dramatically. There's all of these things moving that we can't see that definitely affect what's going on inside us as we're in a space. I'm so happy with your invocation. I'm just like, can we do another one? No.
Well,
Maybe
maybe
today as
let's
we're talking, we'll do a couple of them.
yeah, we can
That might be.
absolutely stop as we go through, and it may help people to integrate and process the information as we go along and just move things forward for us in the conversation or bring through whatever the next thing is. We can absolutely do that.
I
And
think that would be really
I
great.
realize we're already jumping to talking about things that we're experiencing or that you're experiencing in the house, but first let's back like way up to what is this inn that you've been talking about, and how did you even come to find it or have anything to do with this?
So as I'm learning as I get older, there's often the daily mundane, somebody asked me to take out the trash explanation, but that usually is following different explanation. And that explanation is usually because you need to be somewhere that you're supposed to be to learn something. I really think that we are moved and called to and given opportunities to go to new places because each of them holds a lesson we're going to learn. Sometimes those lessons are really, really fun. And sometimes those lessons are harder, but that they are part of us becoming a more fully developed and more realized person who can then reach out. Sometimes learning or going to a new place and having a hard experience there and learning how to deal with it then means you can turn around and put your hand out to somebody on the path behind you and say, here's the experience that I had. Yours is going to be different. Perhaps some of what I've learned will help inform your experience. And I mean, that's the whole reason we do this podcast, really, is Jen and
Absolutely.
I, yeah, she has a whole history of different experiences than I've had. Strangely, they often seem to lead us to the exact same place. And I learn from you every time we're together. And I know you've often expressed that things that I say will make you go, that's what that meant.
Oh, absolutely. I learn from
So
you every time we speak.
the mundane version of how I found the inn is I have a little business, Dark Flower Books and Folk Art, where I sell my paintings and my prints and I make puppets. We'll have to do a fun episode on ball magic at some point.
Yeah.
That's a great, cool thing to talk about. And I got asked to vend at an event to help raise awareness and funds for the longer version, the more spiritual version of this. So I was just about to publish the book of Samael that we spoke about at length last week. And I'm a person who's a big fan of naps. I don't know if anybody in the car right now is like, yeah, I could use one of those, but I'm a napper hardcore. And this one afternoon, I had been doing a lot of things and I needed to get up that evening and sit down and edit the book of Samael. But I decided I was going to take a nap before I did that. And I laid down for a nap. And when I woke during the nap, I had this incredibly vivid experience that didn't feel like a dream. And it's actually the opening chapter of the second book because I had this experience and I woke up from the dream and went, what in the world was that? And it took me a few minutes to kind of right myself. And Samael showed up and he said, where is my book, Umshara? And I said, I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. Like I was going to take a nap first before I wrapped it up. And he said, not that one, the next one. And that was the first moment when I realized he wasn't just going to be hanging out, but that he now had plans for what we were going to do next. And I still hadn't finished what we did first. What happened was I quickly came to realize that the first 6 months with him were just him helping me to get through a phase of comprehending that he existed, that my world was never going to be the same, to get me a sort of a fundamental shift in perspective that I needed. And of course, at the time, I was like this is my hard spiritual work. I don't have to do anything after this, only to discover that no, 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 this was the puppy bowl before the Super Bowl, so to speak. And that those first 6 months and all the experiences in that book were literally him just getting me to a point where I could get over the shell shock of him being around and really listen. So it turns out phase one was get used to Archangel visiting. Phase two was, okay, kid, now we go to work. And one of the things that he told me I needed to do was that, well, he said, you have a lot to learn from the dead, which is not something you want to hear waking up from a nap.
Or maybe ever.
Oh
Not
no.
usually top
What
on
does
your list.
that mean? Exactly. What does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that? Um, and exactly how is that going to manifest? And right about that time, the owner of a local metaphysical shop who carries a lot of my merchandise called me up and said, there's this 1747 tavern outside of Winchester, and it is very, very haunted. And we are holding a little market in the backyard while we do paranormal investigations and tours of the house. And my first thought was, no, this doesn't sound like it's my bag. Like I do metaphysical markets, but I never really stepped into the paranormal thing before. I didn't know any about it. I've never even watched any of those TV shows before. I always vend with my good friend Kathy and her daughter. And they were up for it. They were like, let's do it. Ooh, this sounds cool. And I'm like, I don't know, folks. How far away from the house are we going to be? Like, I mean, literally, my experience with the paranormal is watching Scooby Doo when I was 6 years old. And that was never actually paranormal. It was always a guy in a bad mask. So I finally went, okay, if you guys are excited, I'll go. And they're like, oh, we want to go on a tour. And I went, no, I'm just going to set up my tent. I'll be out there. I'll make some special merchandise. But it just wasn't my world. It wasn't my world. So then Samael tells me I have a lot to learn from the dead. And I went, oh, okay, well, but I literally did not make any connection between the two. One was a vending event my friend has had talked me into, and this was completely different. This was my spiritual life, right? It had nothing to do with that. So we get to the event and we set up our tents and everything. I had this picture in my mind that it was going to be like this big Victorian house on a hill where it was perpetually lightning. They always show that, when you watch like those films where it's like, ta-da! And that we would be in a parking lot really well removed from it. I didn't realize I was going to be right in the backyard of this little tavern. And we get there and they're like, donuts and coffee in the kitchen. And I literally stood there going, on one hand, it is free donuts. On the other hand, they're inside a haunted tavern. Donuts, tavern, donuts, tavern. Well, this will give you a lot of insight into my psyche, the donuts one. So I went and stuck my head in. My friends were with me. We went, they were right in the first room. I walked in, grabbed a donut, and left and went, okay, great. Made it in and out of the haunted house. That's all I'm going to do. It was a 2-day event as I spent time in this place. I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to be of service here. And I couldn't pinpoint it. I couldn't tell exactly where it came from, but I was just captivated by it. And I'm sure a part of it is this. I have a degree in colonial archaeology, and this is a 1747 tavern where no one has ever dug a hole and excavated. And I'd worked for Monticello, and I'd been a tour guide at Ashlon Highland, and I'd gone to digs that were sponsored by William and Mary, and I dug in places all over Virginia and Maryland. When you go to dig for those museums, there's already somebody there running the show, and usually they've already been excavating for a few years. This was untouched ground. And the other part of it was my novels are set in 1746. So I know the time period really well, both from the angle of my archaeology degree and from the research that I did for the Spiral Pathways series. And so here I am standing in a building that is literally straight out of the time period that I write about and that I spent, years getting a degree on that. And so I'm sure there was an intellectual part of that. And Joseph is the owner of the place. He hasn't had it very long, but he was really busy because there were people coming in and out doing tours and talks, and it was a very busy thing. And all I could think was, I have got to get this man alone in a room and say, I'm going to have to calm down first so I don't look like a crazy person he just met, and tell him I want to help this place stand, but I don't know the entire rationale for it. But then on the second note, can I dig holes in your backyard? Didn't know me from Adam. I was one of the vendors, but I told him I want to help in any way I can. I don't know why, but I feel really compelled to do this. And second, can I dig a 2 foot by 2 foot test square in your backyard and see if any artifacts come out? And he said yes to both. And what has developed out of that, I thought I'd be out there with a couple of volunteers, 2 volunteers and me for a week or two. We'd pull out some artifacts. That would be the end of it. Instead, I now have a garage full of artifacts. There are over 70 people involved on this project and more coming every day. We just had some retired career archaeologists join the project. And so this has been twofold. One part of my work there is helping to coordinate the volunteers and research the history of the inn and work with the local historians and get to know the area and to pull these artifacts out of the ground and clean them and research them and catalog them, because this is an incredible building, historical building that needs to be preserved. The other aspect of it is that I very quickly learned that the less, when you go to college and there's always that lab course that goes along with your main course, this was going to be my lab. Some things that Samael wanted me to learn. One, to let fears that I've carried around for years go. Two, to help me find my own sense of worth. I grew up as a people pleaser, and often my sense of worth has been lacking. Don't sound that way on this podcast, but it's a long process, right? People
Yeah,
always say, you
isn't it
sound really
like
confident. And I'm like, a lot of the people who sound the most confident are the ones who have the longest way to go. My husband is always telling me, like, you're good at that. When people give me compliments, I go, oh, well, haha. And he's like, why can't you just say thank you? And I'm like, because I think they're, they don't know. They don't know what a mess I am. And I don't know, dear listeners, if any of you have that same concept, but I think a lot of us do. This idea that we
absolutely?
are somehow not worthy of the things that are presented to us. So Samael quickly pointed out that I had things to do on worth and that I was going to be learning these things in the lab. And the lab was a haunted tavern. That is the longest answer to your question.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly the answer, is how this came to be. And I remember following you through all of that and all of the synchronicities, and then us talking later about all of the things that had to have happened and all of the little things that had to have come through for years building up to this, to
Yeah.
bring everything together to where you were united with this inn, with your exact set of skills and passions and knowledge. And I remember the weekend, that first weekend that you were there for Paracon, and you were like sending Marcos all throughout the day and all throughout that night, and then you were there late. And I spent like the entire weekend listening to and responding to Marcos. And my husband was like, on Penzi, like, what's the update? What's the latest thing? Because it was such an active, huge, weekend. There were so many things that were happening in the house with paranormal things. There was so much that was happening with you personally. But I remember one of the things that came out of that was you saying that you had really created, and you, of course, would never have said it this way because you were like, oh, it just sort of happened and whatever. But what really happened was you recognizing the potential for community there, and all of these different people that were excited about it. And you were like, before we leave this weekend, we're going to get an email list, and we're going to have a list, because so many people were tapping into that same thing I think that you were tapping into there, that there was something that was drawing people that was beyond an interest in the paranormal. There were all these people who also had this deep sense of, I'm supposed to help. I want to help. And by the time you left that weekend, you had a whole email list of people that were offering all different kinds of things.
Yeah. It was really strange because I knew that there was something there. And if you ask me about it now, all I can say is the house told me to do it. There was something in that house that compelled me. I wanted to help. And I looked at Joseph, who was dragging decades of trash out of the house. It needs a new roof. It needs a new chimney. I mean, it's rock solid. It has literal tree trunks holding it up in the root cellar. Something dads would say is they don't build them like this anymore. They really don't. You build an inn in the 1740s, you're building it to stand the test of time. And it's been there, you know, I think like 260 something years at this point. Oh God, my math may be off, but it's been there centuries. And a lot happens in a building over centuries. And I'll tell you a little bit about my first experience. After I went in and grabbed a donut and made it back outside without being possessed. Later on, I wanted to go back in. And one of the reasons I wanted to go back in is that I used to work for UVA's Department of Architectural Archaeology. Now, this was, what, 30 years ago. I don't even know if it's still there. Joseph has this dear friend, and she's wonderful. And she had said to me, I'd really love you to walk through the house and look at it because there's Victorian pieces in it, there's colonial pieces in it, and tell us what era you think things are. So as Joseph is working on things, he doesn't tear something out that's probably been there since the 1740s as he's trying to restore things. So, from an intellectual standpoint, I needed to walk through the house and look at it and get a sense of its decor and the space, and look at the beams upstairs, and look at the floor plan. I haven't gone traipsing around a haunted house before. My friend Melissa was there vending, and Melissa does Reiki. And of course, whenever I hear someone does Reiki because of you, Jen, I'm like, this is a good person that I need to have go with me. I know that Melissa's very sensitive to these energies because she does Reiki. And I said, Melissa, I need to walk through the house and do a little survey. Would you mind walking through with me? And the house was open. There were people walking all through it. It wasn't like it was standing alone on a darkened hill. It was noon on a Saturday in, I think, April. And she said, sure, I'll go with you. So we walked in. And as I said, I don't consider myself super sensitive to, now I think I'm a lot more attuned to it than I was. I could feel energy moving when I was working magic or doing spells. I could feel, if I focused, I could feel energy moving up through the earth. But I had never tried to sit and like listen for a ghost before. So I was counting on Melissa to tell me if she felt anything. So as we're walking through the ground floor of the house, there was this strange, heavy feeling around your heart. And since this time, I have everyone at that Paracon would come, and in the weeks after would come out and say they could feel this. It has changed a lot since then. We can talk more about that, but this was the first experience. Melissa asked if I wanted to go upstairs. So we went up to the second floor, and you could take two routes. You can continue up to the next landing, or you can take a right and take a step up into this little bedroom that has blue and white wallpaper. And Melissa said, let's go in here. So we said, okay. So we took a right into the blue and white wallpaper room. And it's a small bedroom. It's on the back of the house. And there's a little bed there. And there's a closet in the wall that appears to be perhaps part of a dumbwaiter because downstairs there's another opening into what appears to be the same space next to the fireplace. And as we turned into the room, and I'm going, "Ooh, look at the wallpaper, and ooh, look at the molding," and, kind of looking at what age I think the floorboards are, and are they original? And I'm looking for square nails in the walls, and in this, there's, like, a lot of Victorian wallpaper that's peeling. A lot of the plaster has buckled. So I'm really focused on that. And as we got to the center of the room, and it's not a very big room, all of the sudden, I felt the heat level. I mean, it went from 60 degrees in the room to 100 degrees in the room, like that, so quick. And my vision started fogging around the edges, and my heart started to race. And I turned to the left, and I swear to you, there was someone standing in the corner of the room. And my brain did not know how to process this. I always thought when I was a kid and you read choose your own adventure books and they take place in a haunted house or whatever, I always thought that my natural reaction to feeling a presence there that wasn't fully materialized would be to A, wet my pants, B, scream, and C, haul butt out of the room. And instead, what was happening is my brain was trying to go, okay, maybe you came up that stair really fast and the blood rushed to your head. That's why you can't see. Oh, no, you're having some sort of a heart thing. Oh, perhaps the sun came out. Your brain is trying to rationalize what's going on, but it's getting all this conflicting information at the exact same time, and it gets overwhelmed. And so instead, you do what deer do when they see headlights. I just froze. And I was trying to get my eyes to adjust to whatever was in the corner of the room. And my brain is going, is it a coat rack? Is it except that it was putting off energy unlike a piece of furniture. It was putting off energy like a person. And at that moment, Melissa grabs my hand and she says, there's a man in the corner of the room. And she's looking in the same direction I am. And at that point, I went, oh no. Like, I don't know what to do here. And Melissa basically dragged me out of the room. And when we got into the next room, it all went away. It was just gone, like it had never been there. My heart rate slowed down. My vision returned to normal. It was suddenly 65 degrees again. It was just fine. And there was a big bed in that second room, and the room felt really, really peaceful. A lot of people have started calling, and it had sort of a pink and white wallpaper. And a lot of us, for some reason or another, a lot of the people who work at the house, we didn't realize it, but we all think that room feels like a mother's room. And it wasn't until some of us were trading information the other day that we were like, oh, up in mom's room. Yeah, yeah, up in the mother's room, right? So I sat down on the corner of the bed there and just tried to process, like, am I having a medical event? Like, what just happened to me? But it was all gone. And that was the first moment when I thought, okay, there's definitely something here. And then, of course, as I started doing research into the house, and into the people who built it, I found, according to Ancestry.com, it appears that there may be a family connection between myself and and Mary Ross Littler, who was one half of the couple that built the inn, and her father, Alexander, we think, gave them the money to build the inn in the first place. Alexander Ross was a Scottish immigrant and a Quaker. But what's also been really unusual is the number of people who have showed up to dig there or who just drive by and park their car while we're digging. And they will come in the backyard and they will go, well, you're not a construction crew. You're not going to tear it down. Like, it turns out there's a tremendous number of people in this area who this house, they drive past it all the time, and they've always felt very strongly that they needed to go there. They've never been inside. But now what they were seeing as we started the archaeology digs there is crews of somebody working in the backyard. And a lot of them felt a fear thinking, oh no, is there going to be a development here? Is it going to get torn down? Because they've never taken that, they've never actually stopped and gone to see if they could be there. And then they will round, it was very funny. We had one woman a couple weeks ago who did this. She came around the corner and she saw me and she went, whoa, you're not a construction crew, I guess, because she thought I was female. So I was probably, and also I do not look like I have a body that could sustain 1 day of construction. So, and I explained, no, we're an archaeology team. We're all volunteers. We're working here to try to find more about the history of the inn. And you saw her shoulders just drop with relief. And she said, so you're not here to tear it down. And I said, no, God, no, we're trying to keep it standing. And she said, I've driven past this place for years. It has this special place in my heart. I've never stopped. And I said, would you like to go inside? And her eyes lit up and she said, are you kidding me? And she is not the only person who has had this. We have people stop all the time when they see us out there in the yard, and they're having to look hard because we're in the backyard. But when they see cars there, they come and they go, we're neighbors and we just want to know what's going on. We love this place and we don't know why. And none of them can articulate. It's not like their family used to live there. It's just something about the house. And so once we bring them inside, a lot of them, and they're total strangers, will just start telling me their stories. And a lot of them, by the time they get I mean, they'll start telling me incredibly personal things. And by the time they're done, they've joined the archaeology team, they've signed up to volunteer. And we come to find out as we're doing the research on this house, a tremendous number of them are actually related to someone who at one point was on that property or lived on that property. And so now there's this entire community of the living that have rallied around this place and that are building their own community there. I can tell you right now, as the ground gets, as we edge towards winter, in the winter time and the ground freezes, you can't really dig. It's mud. It's, you can't see what's going on. It's unpleasant to be digging when it's 10 degrees outside. And all of these people are saying, we're not just not going to see each other in winter, are we? What are we going to do? We've started hosting school groups and hosting game nights in the house. And people want to get together and have potlucks. And we're talking about once we can get consistent running water in the inn, having artifact cleaning teams and parties there. Because everybody, if I try to cancel a dig, someone else steps in and says, I'll take over. They just don't want there to be a week where they're not there. And it's an incredibly beautiful thing that I never expected to happen.
Yeah, and getting to watch this evolve and watch the growth of it and the types of things that were happening too. I think, one of the things that seems to have really been shifting in the inn as I watched its progression is more and more real sensitivity to those who are still residing in that house and just don't have a body. And
Yeah.
the amount of awareness and directly interacting with them as opposed to just initially, it seems like there was a lot of going through the house with the sense of people just wanting to have a paranormal experience and wanting to get a sense of it. And I think one of the things that the presence of the people that have been drawn there, and certainly the presence of you there, is that there's shifted more and more this sensitivity to and care for those that are living there and those whose souls are still really wrapped up in it. And I've heard you describe so much the ways in which the spirits in the house are expressing their joy of your being there, their welcoming of your being there. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really beautiful thing. I remember that first experience where the spirits were really aggravated a little bit,
Yes.
and the things that they were doing, it was very chaotic, and things were getting kind of thrown about and cast about and
Hmm.
turned upside down and all kinds of stuff. And as you have really consciously come into the house and said, I'm here to help. I care about you. I care about this house. And I know that you really care about this. And I want to restore this and help Joseph. That's what he's doing. And directly dialoguing with them, and not having at the time a lot of psychic anything or seeing stuff, but just walking in and saying, hey, just sort of talking to the house and interacting and bringing flowers. And you started
Yes.
doing things, helping it to feel like a home again.
Yeah.
And that transformation and all of these people coming in and offering to, I've heard you talk about, people just giving toys for the children that
Yeah.
we now know are residing in the upstairs, and picnic tables and old Victrolas and all of these things. There's something about that house that is calling people and seems to be bringing all these different kinds of levels of healing to people in
Yes.
all these different ways that you had tapped into. And I hear more and more stories of you sharing all of these other people that are being drawn for this. And I remember really early on, Keith and I talking about how it seemed so clear that there was your healing and the house's healing were really connected. And I think there's a lot of that for a lot of people. And it's such an interesting thing that a place that seemed so broken is actually become like this beacon of healing and helping people to see hard things. And
Yes.
the people and the house all healing in concert together.
One of the things that's been interesting, Joseph was talking about when he first took over the house, there was someone living in the house, but they were only in one room and they had boarded the doors to the rest of the house shut. So the house has been pretty much continuously lived in. I mean, no one's residing in it every night right now, but Joseph's right next door. And we're there a lot now. But three-quarters of the house was just boarded up and empty. Although neighbors did report seeing, even though that had happened, a woman moving past the windows regularly. So this house is literally, as far as we can tell right now, and we're still putting together all of the owners and the timelines and when they were there and everything, it appears that this house has been continuously occupied since it was built. And we know, sadly, of quite a few deaths on the property. But when Joseph took over, he unboarded those doors and was moving through rooms of the house that had not been lived in for probably decades and pulling out all this trash. He'll tell you, like, I didn't know that it was haunted. There was a lot of, I mean, people were getting scratched, people were getting bitten. There were things, like Jen said, moving across spaces. There were obviously a lot of unhealed energies in the place, but also I think energies that were just used to being on their own. Imagine if you have sat quietly in a dark room by yourself for decades, since the 1980s, and then suddenly somebody opens the door and comes in and starts moving everything around. You're going to go, what are you doing? You're going to have a reaction to that. And then there were people who were like, oh, we need to get rid of the spirits. And I, they are, my feeling has been they're there doing spiritual work. They wouldn't be there if they weren't meant to be there. And the idea that we're going to come in and just like force them out because I don't think you should be here, especially when the person doing it has never resided in there. Of course, it was going to kick up adversarial feelings in the energy there. Plus, just echoes of energies that were in the space that might not even be conscious were there. Before I opened up any pit in the backyard, I talked a lot to people who were spending time in the house who were a lot more psychic than I was. And I said, I really want to help. Um, I don't hear them the way you do. If you do encounter a spirit, can you please let them know that I am listening, that I want to help, that I want to keep the place standing, and that I'm not here to hurt, and I want to be a friend. And so Every time I went to the house, I would go in and say, every time we came to dig, I would go in. I usually brought flowers or something else, like some quilts for the beds, or and Joseph, meanwhile, was putting furniture back in the house to make it feel lived in. He's making little repairs. He's pulling all the buckled plaster off the original colonial beams in the attic, where you can see the Roman numerals carved in them by the woodworker that was first there. I was asking Jen and anybody I could find that did energy work, can you please send good energy to this house? And if the entities inside are responsive, that they know that they're cared for and that we want to find out more about them. I would sing in the house, and it was actually odd how often I would walk in and find somebody else from the archaeology team singing in the house, or I was singing. People would come with instruments and say, I feel called to go in with my fiddle and sit in a room and play. Joseph got a sound system put in there, and we would play all sorts of things. Like the other day, we had big band. I always wanted to play big band swing music in the house, and you just hear it echo through the halls, this sort of joyful dance music from the big band era. And we'll play classical music in there. We bought the children toys. People brought vintage rocking chairs and doll cradles, and people built things. Allie's dad built a podium for the guest book in the front hall. And we're going in and as we're finding the family trees of the people who lived here, we're going in and we're saying people's names. Are you here? Are you here? We started looking up their grave sites of people who had resided in the house and going to visit them in local cemeteries and leaving them flowers. Just trying to, we wanted them to realize that we weren't trying to move them out, but that if they needed us, we were there. If we had someone on the archaeology staff who had a birthday, we would bring cupcakes and go inside to sing happy birthday. So any spirits that wanted to come could come to a birthday party. We know there's little children's spirits all through the house. Lots of people say they feel the children tugging at their skirts, especially if they're a mom. They'll say, oh, I can feel a little one holding on to my clothes. And you'll see some of the balls and toys that we got sometimes moving around in the attic, going in and just singing and playing games at the kitchen table. I teach a whole series of art classes inside that are time appropriate to the past. I taught a broom making class in there on Saturday. I've done a quilting class. I'm doing a colonial bookbinding class this coming weekend. So the old arts, if you lived in that house during the Victorian era, you would have seen people sitting in crazy quilting and embroidering and gossiping over coffee and tea. And so we're trying to do these things there and then use the names of the spirits, oh, Mary Elizabeth, if she's here, she probably thinks that our stitches are too big, and laughing and just trying to let them know. It's been so wonderful because when we first got to the house, Joseph would talk about how he would go in to try to make repairs, and he would feel this sadness around his heart, and his whole mood would change, and he just couldn't stay in there very long. And now when we go, there's a group of us sitting in the parlor chit-chatting while the spirit box makes little notations about what we're talking about, and Joseph can do repairs. We're in there with him, and he says, I love it when you guys are here. It feels like a family lives here again. I never expected this to happen, and now I'm learning to become more confident with turning towards my fear, because that I told you at the beginning of this podcast that I had this experience, um, this what seemed like something more than a dream. Um, and then Samael said, "Where's my book?" And in that dream, I was chasing this butterfly. There was a lot of fear, a lot of my old fears, without going too deep into my own psychology. There were a lot of fears in the dream, and I was trying to fly away from them. And I've had dreams ever since I was a child where I was inside a big building. Sometimes it would be a church, sometimes it would be like a train station, and I had wings. And there were people on the ground trying to grab my feet and pull me to earth. And I was frantically trying in the upper reaches of these big buildings, trying to find a way out. But every window I went to was barred. Every window I could break was too small for me to fit through. And in this dream, I would just be in a wild, like a panic, trying to get out of the building. And Samael told me what would happen if you flew towards your fear. And I thought, are you crazy? I'm not doing that. I have 50 years of frantically trying to get away from it and trying to keep whoever's pulling me to earth from pulling me down and destroying me. And he told me, you must fly towards your fear. That's what's happened in this house, where sometimes I'll be in the house alone and I will see something move, or I will see something out of the corner of my eye. And instead of turning and hauling butt out to the yard, okay, full disclosure, I have done that numerous times. But what I'm learning to do now is instead take a deep breath. Remember that Samael has told me to try and fly towards my fear and that I have much to learn from the dead. And so what I'm trying to do now instead of running out of the room is get myself under control. Take a deep breath. Understand that when they appear, it's not their fault how they look. They are dealing with a whole different set of energy, and the world looks very different to them than it does to me. So that if I see someone standing in the corner of the room, they're probably not trying to frighten me. They're just present, and this is how they look. And if I can take a deep breath and get myself under control and turn and fly towards my fear, that I will learn something, maybe about them, but more likely about myself. And I'm hoping that as I repeatedly do these things in this lab, that I will become a more worthy member of the community that's being built there. It is hard work. It is scary work. But I'm sitting here today saying I've been touched by things I couldn't see. I've seen things that made my heart leap into my throat. But I I'm physically fine and I feel so much stronger and so much more aware of energies moving around me that I can't see than I did 6 months ago. And to have people say that they now want to hang out in this haunted house because it is the happiest place in their lives is absolutely incredible to me.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. I feel like this would be a good time for a musical interlude.
Yes, definitely would.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm inviting angels and I'm inviting the guardian angels of everyone listening to come through my angelic gateway, which I'll have to explain later. Just for this for this purposes,
The
just
next
accept that
podcast
part.
is Angelic Gateway.
Yeah. So we will. I'm inviting your guardian angels to be more present for you, for your individual guardian angel to reflect back to you your own magnificence, your own divinity, your own worth. And I invite in angels of integration to help us to integrate and make sense of the information that we have heard and all that we have received. I invite the angels of clearing to lift and clear away anything that is not yours that you may have picked up, or any emotions that do not need to be present, to be lifted and cleared away for your highest good. Invite the angels of the divine earth to be present and help to ground the energy of everyone listening. And I invite you all to breathe in and out through your heart space in the center of your chest. And just so you know, my voice will change here for a minute with a little bit of effects to help to bring you into more of a peaceful space.
Would just like to say I need to listen to that on repeat for about 5 hours now. Samael came through so incredibly clearly during that. But I should have made this connection, but I didn't. The book series Spiral Pathways that I do, the main character, Sorcia Stewart, is representative of some aspects of my spiritual development. And long before I found this in, she had been on a journey. And when you get to about book 4, she starts learning about bone casting and she starts learning there's a different side to the world that we see and a world that looks darker than what we're used to. And I know, Jen, you and I have been having extensive discussions about dark and light lately. In the books, she starts exploring a little bit more about the concept of darkness. And you would think, as I have a character that is often a stand in for me in some of the things that she does, who has been edging towards this for a couple of years in a book series now, that I would have reflected that back and looked at my own life and said, this is a path that you're going to be taking at some point. And it was just, they often say that art reflects life. In my case, a lot of times art seems to precede life. I think at times go back and read things that I've written and then go, oh, I should probably pay more attention to that on the road ahead. The first book of Samael, like I said, was very transformative for me in terms of my worldview and how I think about life and death. Over the last 6 months, I've been collecting notes for the second one, or as he said, the next one is going to be all about the experiences I've been having in relation to the house and outside the house with him, or outside the lab, as we should say. One of the things that he's been saying to me lately that came through probably the clearest while you were singing just now is I keep asking him as I'm having these experiences, what has happened to me? Because a lot of times I can't really process in the moment what's going on. And then there's a lot of time afterwards of going, what's happening to me? What's going on? And his answer today, as you were singing to the question, what has happened to me, is you have become a new thing, Umshal, a bone witch and speaker for the dead. It is needed and it will heal. When I started moving into my 40s and 50s and I started watching friends and family members around me grasp the concept of aging and death and experiencing it much more presently. You know, when you're in your 20s, you think you're immortal, pretty much. Anybody who's ever seen like a 23-year-old boy with a car, they think they're immortal, pretty much. Like we fling our bodies at all sorts of things we probably shouldn't do in the way that we eat and drink and go rock climbing with probably one less safety rope than we should and drive our cars a little too fast. And then as you start to age, you start to realize that you are a mortal being. And as you have experiences, you start to realize that, you know, your body can only take so much and it needs to sleep a little bit longer and heal a little bit longer. And we're very, very good at welcoming new souls to this planet when they are born. There's lots of celebration around babies. Obviously, not in every single case. There's a lot of children born into poverty and have a lot of needs. But we're definitely better in a lot of parts of our society in terms of taking care of the young. We think of the children. What are we going to do for the children? We do everything for our children that we is possible to do. But an area where we really don't do as much because we don't seem to know how is what happens on the other transition, the transition out of your body and out of this present lifetime that you are in. There's a lot of societies that do it a lot better than we do. Just yesterday, I was at an event and this couple came in and he was from Mexico and he was talking all about the Day of the Dead, which, oh man, the beautiful folk art that comes out of the Day of the Dead. Oh, it's incredible. But anyway, and he and I got into a conversation. He was talking about what a difference it was to come from the culture he was from, where there's multiple days at the end of October and beginning of November where you go into the cemeteries and you have a picnic at your ancestors' grave sites and you leave flowers for them and you clean up their stones and everything is celebrated. Or it's a celebration of their lives. And you have altars in your home where you're leaving out their favorite things and putting up photographs of them. And the dead are very present there in those celebrations. The family's all back together, whether they're alive or they're deceased. He said it was so interesting to get married to someone who grew up in the United States and come up here, and that just doesn't happen here. That there was this undercurrent constantly of a fear of death and of not being prepared, and everything looks scary and terrifying. You know, and especially when we look at the number of our relatives and things that we lost during COVID, you know, that was sort of almost like a mass. We had to face this tragedy that was going on together. We really didn't have the tools for it as a society. And so I really feel like this is where my calling is going to be in my future years, is not just going into places and trying to listen for spirits, to try to help the living realize that you are a spirit, just like they are. You may be embodied right now, but one day you won't be. And we need tools and love and understanding and ceremonies to mark these passings with more than just trepidation and grief. That we need to understand we are all going to go through this one day, and it will benefit us all to be able to reach out to the living and help to better hold their hands as they go through this transition, and to help their families go through this transition, and to reach out to those who, for whatever reason, have gone through that tradition transition and are still here in some way on this plane, and help everyone to have a joyous connection and a joyous crossing towards what comes next. And so that is, I think, is where I am headed to uh, to help in that aspect. Um, And that's what I'm learning from this house. I do want to speak real quickly on where the inn gets its name because everyone gets real confused by that. And it's
Yeah, I
kind of
would love
funny.
to. I don't actually know the answer to that.
So it is called the Blue Ball Inn. And everybody says that and then they giggle, right? Because, okay, come on, what everybody knows what that actually means in slang in our Western society, right? The blue ball in. And everybody wants to know why in the world is it called that? So here's the thing. First off, it is not the only blue ball inn in America. There's another one in Pennsylvania. I think there might be another one up in Massachusetts. If you want to learn more about the inn, you want to look up um, the Blue Ball Inn that's in Virginia that was built in 1747. Joseph actually has a TikTok where he does make tons of videos about the inn. Look up Blue Ball Inn 1747. The reason, and then if you go to England, there are tons of Blue Ball Inns. And the reason for this is that during the colonial era, if you ran a tavern and you wanted to let people know that there was rooms at the inn available for rent, you would take a blue round fishing lure and you would either hang it out in front of the building or down at the nearest crossroads. And as people went by on horseback or in their carriages, they would see the blue ball hanging there and go, "Oh, I can turn off here and get a room for the night." Or, "Oh, they've got space for me to stop by for dinner." And so a lot of these taverns took on the name the Blue Ball Inn because of these fishing lures. The way in which we use it today didn't come along till much later. So, this particular tavern is called the Blue Ball Inn for that reason. It was also known, if you look on a lot of old maps, as Widow Littler's Tavern. The reason for that is that the couple who built it was John Littler. He was the descendant of English immigrants, and Mary Ross Littler, who was the descendant of Scottish immigrants. And they met up in Pennsylvania and got married. They were Quakers, and then they moved down to this area. And as far as we can tell, it appears that John and Mary Ross borrowed money from Mary's dad, who was a well to do Scotsman who had come to the area. And they opened several mills and the tavern. Sadly, not long after the tavern opened, uh, sickness came through the area. And we're not sure if it was smallpox or not yet. It's one of the things we're researching. But Mary lost both of her parents, her husband, we believe several of her children, two of her brothers, all within the space of a year. But she was a strong woman. And she got back up, dusted herself off, and continued to run the tavern as Widow Littler's Tavern after that for many years with the assistance of her other children. And so on a lot of the old maps of Brucetown, um, you'll see it labeled as Widow Littler's Tavern, and it's the same building. We will have lots more information in this on our bonus content when I'll be talking with Joseph about how he took over the building and what has transpired since. And we'll give you links in there and all sorts of things to follow along the progress of the inn on Facebook and on TikTok. And if you are in the Winchester area and you want to get involved doing research or archaeology or house repairs or any of those wonderful things or fundraising, we would love to have you in the community and we'll put all that in our bonus content for you.
And I will say, if you want to find it or anything, I know Keith and I tried the other day. We were near there. I knew we had to be near there, and I was trying to find it, and I searched and searched and couldn't find it. And I was like, I need to just go to Tava's website because I know I can find it. That is the easiest way, at least as far as I could find, to
Yes.
connect with all of that.
Brucetown, so Brucetown is also known as, that area is also known as Clearbrook, Virginia. But I will tell you something odd about the inn. After that very first Paracon, I got in the car and I'm not very good on backcountry roads. I like couldn't find my way out of a paper bag. And so I set my GPS for my hometown and I started driving. And the next thing I know, I'm looking at the inn again. I had literally made a circle and come back to the inn. And I thought, okay, I had to have punched in the wrong address, or it pulled up when I was trying to find the inn in the first place. And I sat, pulled over, sat down, wrote, double checked that it said my hometown and took off again. And 10 minutes later, I'm looking at the freaking inn again. And I thought, okay, this has now become like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And eventually I turned off the GPS, drove a good distance away, and then turned on the GPS and got home. So the funny thing was, the next time I was at the inn, I said to some of the other volunteers there, "Oh, I'm such a huge doofus. Like I don't know how a GPS works. I ended up back here twice, and come to find out that that is not an experience that is singular to me. But frequently, for some unknown reason, GPS in that area will simply direct you back to the inn when you try to leave. And it happens sometimes, and it doesn't happen other times. And we don't know why. So, yeah, it may have something to do with the. I'm saying I'm going with the electrical or whatever other currents running around that place.
Something that occurred to me from, an energetic perspective. I mean, I teach all kinds I teach energy clearing, and I teach a specific way of clearing spirits from spaces, from people's bodies. And the first thing I thought was, oh, great, I'll just, I'll do a spirit release and I'll help everybody and that'll be great. And it was clear from talking to you from the first 2 days that you spent there that there was something. They'd had different kinds of energy workers, they'd had priests, they had lots of different approaches to doing that, and that it was not received well and things escalated. And I remember asking you to ask Samael, should I just do this? Why is that? And I remember you having him say, it's not that they haven't been given the choice or the
Yeah.
option to leave, and that
Yes.
they weren't like abandoned by the divine. They were doing work there, and that
Yes.
this was like their choice. And this was the first time I'd ever heard anything like this, where in my background and everything, it's all about, they need to go to the light. They need help getting there, and we'll call in the angels and we'll work with all of this and they'll help them go up and everything's great. And I've done that on a number of occasions in old barns where there were spirits that I realized were kind of stuck there, and they were very open to that process and to receiving that process and being like, absolutely, and recognizing that they had been stuck in this kind of perpetual dream that just kept repeating, and they were willing and happy to go. And this was really my first experience with the idea that that's not the thing to do with every place that you encounter. And this has been incredibly instructive for me, in the idea that Samael was basically saying, no, don't do a spirit release on this house. They don't want that. But I could send healing energy to the house as a whole, and
Yes.
just help to uplift the vibration of the place. And
Yes.
that was helpful. And that anything that could just sort of raise the vibration of the place without directly sending to the spirits that were still there, or doing anything to insinuate that they needed to leave, that was, that was the way to go. And I know my lessons and learning in this are going to continue through this process, because that would never have occurred to me. It was always, oh my goodness, well, this is what they need, and that they would all need the same thing. And there's a lot of learning that's coming through with that, not necessarily. And I think it's a really good lesson energetically in making sure that when we step in or decide to intervene somewhere, that we're doing that in right relationship with the spirits of the place and what is in the highest good, and that what we think is in the highest good isn't always the case. And so that's been really, really helpful for me to get to experience some of this tangentially through you.
Yeah. It- And I mean, I would have thought the same thing. One of the first things that I was when I was there, we had a lot of energy workers who would come who would say, can't get past the first floor. They would say that the intensity of the energy gets stronger the higher up in the building you go. And there's an attic up there. And my first experience was with the attic was I tried to walk into one of them and got this wall of heat. And it was so strong that I literally was like, Sam, I only need help. And like, like help, help. There's something's going on here. We've since gone up there and that's where a lot of the children's spirits seem to congregate. And it's interesting. We have a lot of adults who are uncomfortable in the attic. Um, Children seem to love the attic. When we have young people, teenagers and younger, they will go and we say, "Oh, the attic's really intense." They will go, "No, no, that's the most comfortable place in the whole house." And they tend to feel more uncomfortable in what would have been some of the more public rooms of the tavern, like the parlor and that ground floor. And so I'm wondering if it had to do with, the children or the family tended to stay upstairs if they were younger rather than being underfoot with the travelers coming through, that sort of thing, or the sort of more formal adult spaces. But I remember being up there and saying, if there's anything that can't find its way out, I'm going to go down the stairs. You can follow me. And I felt like there was somebody behind me, but when I think they got to the top of the stairs, they stopped. And I think there's an assortment of things going on there. I think there are and this is just from any time a psychic or anybody who's good with energy work comes out of that house. We're actually working on writing a book about the house. And I started off just doing it on the history. And then I started saying to people, if you have an experience in the house and you want to share it, please come tell it to me. Because now what I'm doing is when people come out and they go, this happened, I can say, oh, yeah, 12 other people have had that happen in that room. I'm kind of becoming this repository of somebody 3 months ago had that exact same experience, but it was here, just kind of like helping take all this information in. And so I've become this stockpile of people's experiences within the house. And it's interesting because a lot of the people who do energy work and stuff, they would say that they would go in and offer that. And at first, there were a couple things that did seem like they wanted to skedaddle, but that the majority of the entities in the house or some of them are very territorial. This is my house, and they're worried about the house. They feel a responsibility towards it, like they can't leave until they know it's in good hands, or that they're afraid they're disappointing their family if it falls down. And when you look back and you see that this place was used not only as a tavern, but as a family farm for generations. There are a lot of people who have very strong ties to the land and to the building and to whatever happened there, and they feel a responsibility. And so what I'm hoping is that as we're there to help care for the structure itself, that maybe some of the beings are there will feel like the responsibility is more shared. The other thing that just started happening over the last month is we started getting people related to families that lived in the house arriving at the inn, um, showing up and saying, "My great grandparents lived here. I've, I haven't been in this house since I was 5." Or, I know we actually had someone contact us who is a descendant of the Littlers. And I really look forward to getting in touch with them. First off, because there's a ton of information we don't have. Like, we don't know where John and Mary Littler are buried. We can't find their graves. Um, and there may have been a family plot somewhere on the land. We don't know the exact original borders of the property. And maybe they do. Like, maybe they have some of this information that historically will help us. Also, the other day, to see a couple walk in the door who said, "Oh my gosh, like my family used to live here." We're starting to get more of that happening. And that, like I said earlier, the people who are digging on the archaeology site, who are discovering they have family connections and feel drawn to this place, it's almost like there's a circle happening here where the descendants of some of the people whose spirits may still be in this house are now getting their family coming back to them. And I'm so curious to see what that does. That may be maybe opening this house up and talking about it is is now being able to bring some of these families back. And that may be incredibly healing for the spirits that are still in the house.
Yeah. And I know we have talked a really long time. And so, but I
Yes, we
do want
need
to
to
point
wrap
out
this
that
up.
one of the things that you've done to help to bring healing to the house was to paint a painting of the house as it could be in
Yeah.
a very healing process. And I know this took you a long time of, I mean, usually like you crank out paintings like nobody's business, and this
Yeah.
was a real a real energetic process of creating and bringing the life and the potential of that house into being, and now have just put it in the house the other
Yeah.
day and have
I
what prints available, right? That to sell to
yes.
support the house as well.
Yes, I painted an incredibly large painting that showed the house with a fresh coat of paint and a blue sky behind it, sort of full of what I imagined it looked more like when it was built. And gifted it to the house, and it is now sitting in the parlor over the mantle. We have had prints made, and oh, I guess you know what I should do is put a couple of them up on my Etsy shop. And they're also for sale at the house if you happen to go through there on a tour or something. And 100% of the proceeds goes to helping to save the Blue Ball Inn. So I will get my butt in gear and get one listed up on my Etsy shop, which is Dark Flower Books on Etsy. And then if you would like to help support the inn and you live a little too far away to come visit right now, you could go on and get a print and have it shipped to you. And that money will just go straight back to the Blue Ball Inn.
And we can have links and show notes to things like that too,
Yes.
where
The other thing is I have started making these cute little blue ball in poppets that have a little blue ball on their bellies that say the blue ball in Brucetown. And under the patch is a penny. And in the bonus content, I will tell you the story of the mysterious pennies in the house and that we're finding as we excavate all over the yard. There's a whole penny story that I'll put in bonus content. So I'll pop one of those up on Etsy or a couple of them up on Etsy too if you'd like a little poppet with a penny reminiscent of the pennies at the inn. Then those will be available for two. And once again, all the proceeds go back to helping to support the house.
wonderful. And so I will sing us again into a space that helps to continue with our integration. And I will let you know that throughout, from the time that I began the musical interlude, which really turned into what felt like a pretty strong energy healing that I was bringing through, I have felt it continuing to flow through me to you, the listener, and you, Tava, as well, throughout the rest of the time here. So if you felt things that felt different or anything, that's likely the energy moving and the angels working with you as well. But I just thought I would point that out in case anybody's like, I felt a little weird in the last part. It's probably just energy moving for your highest good and clearing and lifting and integrating. And I invite you again to breathe in and out through the center of your heart chakra. And really to remind you that you can do this many, many times throughout the day, and it will help to bring you back to your center. Bring all of your energies into one centered, coherent place. be grounded on earth, receiving light, and centered in the heart.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Until next time, we hope that you have lovely days. We'll be getting back together soon.